Neshviki Om Agyantimirandasya Jnana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadara Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Mukham karoti vachanam pangam langyate girim yatkapatamam vande Sri Gurudena Taranam Paramanandam Madhavam. Hare Krishna. Thank you for joining. So we are in the concluding part of the fourth canto, chapter 22, instructions by Sanat Kumar to Prithu Maharaj. So last week we had finished the instructions by Sanat Kumar, and though they were kind of complex, but essentially they were reduced to two concepts that we are very familiar with, because cornerstone of Mahaprabhu's philosophy, Srila Prabhupada's philosophy of the way to make advancement is by material detachment and spiritual attachment. So we see this theme over and over again in different flavors. In 6th chapter Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna states that difficult to control the mind. And he says, Krishna says difficult but possible, abhyasena cha vairagya, that by practice and by detachment. So practicing spiritual attachment and developing material detachment. Same theme comes over and over again. And then the four Kumars, specifically Sanat Kumar, who was the spokesperson, he basically talks a little bit more about the dangers of material attachment and how to develop spiritual attachment. And then Prithu Maharaj begins to speak, and he begins to express his gratitude. So we see that he offers everything that he has to the four Kumaras. And he continues with the glorification, understanding that offering to personalities like the four Kumaras is like offering water into an ocean. That whatever he has, his kingdom and his wealth, they have no need for it. And what they have given is incomparable. But yet, in order to express his gratitude, that's a point Prabhupada makes, that just because you say that there is no way for me to reciprocate to the mercy of the spiritual master, does not mean that you say that I won't even try to reciprocate. Or you say that there's no way for me to acknowledge the greatness of the Lord, does not mean that you try and do it. The glory is in trying. So we resume from verse 46, and the chapter has 63 verses. So I'm hoping to finish the chapter and start with the next one next week. Okay, verse 46. Swayameva brahmano bhunte swam vaste swam dadati cha tasyeva anugrehana nam bhunjate kshatriyadhayaha. The Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras eat their food by virtue of the Brahmanas' mercy. It is the Brahmanas who enjoy their own property, clothe themselves with their own property, and give charity with their own property. So this verse very interesting, because it reverses the conventional understanding that it is the duty of the Kshatriyas and the Vaishyas to give in charity to the Brahmanas. And Prabhupada, he develops this theme in the purport. So logically, Prabhupada helps us understand that firstly, we must understand that everything belongs to the Supreme Lord. Right? Ishavasya Nidam Sarvam. Everything is animate and animate is owned by the Lord. Then we know that the Lord says that Namo Brahmanaya Devaya. So, which indicates that the Supreme Lord accepts the Brahmanas as being the worshipable gods. Why? Because their only business is to spread the glories of the Lord in the world. And that makes the Lord very, very highly indebted to the Brahmanas. And we know why. Because Krishna cannot preach himself. Because he would be then accused of partiality. So he only relies on his devotees. And Krishna's strong desire is that the conditioned souls return to their constitutional position. So the Brahmanas, and the Brahmanas at this time is for both the Brahmins and the Vaishnavas, the Brahmanas are doing something that the Lord considers to be putting him in gratitude. Right, so Namo Brahmanaya Devaya. So that means he actually considers the Brahmins to be worshipable. Now, since everything belongs to the Lord, and the Lord considers the Brahmins to be worshipable, it means that everything belongs to the Brahmanas. Now, the Brahmanas, being constantly engaged in the service of the Lord, have very little time to deal with mundane matters like finances of the world or wealth or material belongings. So what do? They delegate that to the Kshatriyas and the Vaishyas. So the Kshatriyas and the Vaishyas are like bankers, and they're holding the wealth of the Brahmanas, managing it on behalf of the Brahmins. And because the wealth belongs originally to the Brahmanas, it is the duty of the Kshatriyas and the Vaishnavas and the Vaishyas to return the wealth to them whenever they need it. So it's just like if I have money in a bank, the bank may be holding, it might be saying that the bank has deposits worth $1 billion. But then when a person goes and says, hey, give me my $10,000, the bank can't say, well, we'll do you a favor and maybe with reluctance we give it to you. It's there, it's the depositor's money. He just says, give it to me. The bank says, yes, sir, here's your money. Thank you very much for trusting us with your business. So factually, the Vaishyas and the Kshatriyas have no right to give charity, because whatever they possess belongs to the Brahmana. So charity means you give something that belongs to you, but the wealth is belonging to the Brahmanas. So they have no right to give charity. However, because the Brahmanas have a heightened sense of humility, they accept their own wealth from the Kshatriyas and the Vaishyas as if they are getting it in charity. Not because it is the wealth of the Kshatriyas and the Vaishyas, it's their wealth, but out of humility, they are saying. It's just like a person goes to the bank and out of humility says, sir, please, if you do not mind, give me my wealth. And actually, in earlier days in India, it was very difficult to get money from the bank, even though it was your own money. You had to fill up the slip and then the teller would match your signatures. I know in my case, my signatures would never match. So they would basically say that, sorry, your signatures don't match, you can't get the money. And then I would go to the manager and literally beg him, I need the money, I need the money. And he would make me do 3 signatures. And then by the time he gave me the money, I was profusely thanking him that thank you so much for giving the wealth, even though it was my money. So even though it's the wealth of the Brahmanas, but because they're naturally so humble, and because they want to acknowledge the fact, because dealing with wealth is dangerous business. So that they are also acknowledging the fact that the Kshatriyas and the Vaishyas, they are undertaking this risk on their behalf. It's like Indra's sword, right? Indra had this sword, and because with the sword he had fought so many battles, killed so many asuras, that sword was completely in the mode of passion. And there was a sage who was performing austerity. So Indra goes to him and says, you take care of my sword. And the sage, because he was magnanimous, said, okay, I'll take care of your sword. And just by associating with that sword, the sage lost his ability to perform austerity. Similarly, the Brahmanas recognize that the Kshatriyas and Vaishyas, they're kindly taking the risk on their behalf. So out of humility, they say, please give in charity. So extending this, it's not just wealth, but every aspect of one's existence. So that's why in the second half of the verse, Prithu Maharaj says even food that is available by the mercy of the Brahmanas. Right? We know of that from the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, that when the Brahmanas performed the yagyas on the behalf of the Kshatriyas and Vaishyas, then the demigods gave rains, and then the cycle of the production of grain happens. So Prithu Maharaj is just using 2 examples. Grains is something very basic for existence. Wealth is something that is very commonplace in charity. But he's saying everything in between, all aspect of one's existence is available by the mercy of the Brahmanas. So Srila Prabhupada explains that this implies that the other varnas should, under all circumstances, be guided by the Brahmanas in terms of what to eat, what not to eat, where to give charity, because not only are they giving in charity to the Brahmanas, the Kshatriyas are also giving in charity at other places. So where to give charity, how to give charity, and all other aspects of one's existence. How to marry, whom to marry, how to perform samskars. All this should be done under the guidance of the Brahmanas. Right? So this is Prithu Maharaj's glorification of the position of the 4 Kumaras, who are the leader of the Brahmanas. And then Prabhupada, of course, makes this point that in the age of Kali, there's a scarcity of real Brahmanas. Or even if there are real Brahmanas, the other Varnas refuse to take guidance from them. Both cases result then in chaos. So in the 2nd canto of the Bhagavatam, 2nd chapter, materialistic people criticize sadhus and devotees as being parasites. And Prabhupada says that this is a symptom of their demoniac mentality, because actually they are living at the mercy of the sadhus, and if they have any hopes of redeeming themselves, they should continue to live under the guidance of the sadhus, not just giving in charity, but also in terms of how to live. So this is the consciousness of Prithu Maharaj. It is meant to inspire the other varnas about the position of the Brahmanas. Of course, the point is made is that this should not be used by the Brahmanas to make demands on the others, because the Brahmanas who are properly situated will not make such demands, and those who make such demands are probably not properly situated. Now, not necessarily, because we do see incidents when Vishwamitra went to speak to Maharaj Dashrath, Durvasha Rishi's interaction with Amrish Maharaj. So they were aware of the position of the Brahmanas, and based on that they were making these demands. So this is a very nice verse, and Srila Prabhupada is such a logical, scientific purport, glorifying the position of the Brahmanas and the need to constantly serve them. Okay, moving on, verse 47. Yedrishi bhakvato gatirapmavada ekantato nigambi pratipaditanaha tushantvadabra karuna sukratena nityam konam tat pratikaroti vinodapatram. Prithu Maharaj continued, how can such persons who have rendered unlimited service by explaining the path of self-realization in relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and whose explanations are given for our enlightenment with complete conviction and Vedic evidence, be repaid, except by folded palms containing water for their satisfaction? Such great personalities can be satisfied only by their own activities, which are distributed among human society out of their unlimited mercy. So Prithu Maharaj wants to make sure that one should not think that by giving something in charity, or by rendering service to the Brahmanas, or by living their life according to the instruction of the Brahmanas, one has repaid the debt. So when the debt is too immense, then it is impossible, or actually even insulting, to try and repay it. Like a child going to the mother and saying that I want to repay the debt of you being my mother. It's insulting to the mother. Or a disciple going to the guru saying that I would like to repay the debt of you being my guru. It's insulting. We see this between Krishna and the gopis, right? In the 10th canto, Krishna says that your love for me is so immense that there is no way that I can repay my debt, even within a lifetime of Brahma. Therefore, what does he say? Please let your glorious deeds be your compensation. Prithu Maharaj is displaying the same mood over here. Now, it's important to note that Prithu Maharaj is saying this after he has already offered everything to the four Kumars. He's not starting the conversation by saying that, oh, your debt is too big, I can't repay it, so namaskar, see you later. That would be escapism. First, he has said that I have offered you everything. And then he says that even after offering you everything, I know that it is impossible for me to repay your debt. So one should not take shelter of phrases like when people speak in relationship to Krishna, that Krishna is God, we are nothing. How can we even think of repaying what Krishna has done for us? He is infinite, we are infinitesimal. This is the ultimate form of hypocrisy. When people are taking shelter of these mental gymnastics. If you really think that Krishna is everything and you're nothing, then first you should surrender. And then after surrendering, you should say that there is no way that I can repay the debt. It's not that you carry on with your own activities, enjoying things on your own and saying that, oh, can't repay Krishna's debt. So what's the point? So Prithu Maharaj here is saying that the four Kumars, they have done unlimited service by explaining to him and the citizens the path of self-realization. So one should understand that more important than the goal is the path to the goal. If you look at the Bhakti Sutras, then a very small portion of it deals with prayojan, which is the goal. Most of it deals with abhidheya, which is the path to the goal. So one may know that there is an immense treasure located somewhere, but unless one gets a map and a guide saying, okay, now you turn right, now you turn left, there's a mountain, avoid the trap over there, there's no point in knowing that the treasure is there. So Prithu Maharaj is acknowledging that what the four Kumars have given them is a path to an invaluable treasure, which means that it is actually more valuable than the invaluable treasure. So he's saying, I can't do anything to repay that. All I can do is fold my palms in a sign of gratitude. Sometimes we tend to take charity for granted, because Srila Prabhupada, he has digested everything and presented to us in a simple manner. And if you look around ourselves, we see that the majority of the people are confused about the purpose of life. Either they don't know, or they don't care, or they're heading in the wrong direction. Now, Prabhupada has given us the right goal and the right path. So the least we can do is to constantly acknowledge the debt of gratitude we have towards him and his representatives. Even though we cannot repay it, the only way to acknowledge this service is by doing what he wanted us to do. So Prabhupada preached because Bhaktisiddhanta wanted him to preach. That was his way of acknowledging the debt of gratitude. And that is the way for us also. We can't ever hope to repay the debt, but if we acknowledge it, then we should aspire to do what he wanted us to do, which is perfect our lives and make the lives of others perfect. In the Gopi Geet by Jaidev Swami, in the Gopi Geet in the Bhagavatam, Tav Kathamritam Tapta Jivanam, that the nectar of your words and the description of your activities are the life and soul of those suffering in this material world. And then later said, these narrations are broadcast all over the world and are filled with spiritual power. Certainly those who spread the message of Godhead are most munificent. Right? So we see that the gopis are so deeply imbued in rasa, and many times they're shown as simple cowherd girls who are what's referred the amorous milkmaids of Vrindavan, who are infatuated by Krishna. But they have actually transcended all the knowledge that is given in the Vedas. And in these verses, we see them acknowledging that the kindest persons are those who are spreading the message of the Lord. Vishwanath Chakravarti says that it is not possible to repay the Guru even by offering everything. Atmavade means considering the Atma by the knowers of the Vedas. May they be satisfied by their acts of uplifting the suffering. Who can repay them? No one can, except by offering water with folded hands. Therefore, I fold my hands. Vishnu Chakravarti also says that this phrase can also be taken as Vinod Patram. So Vinod Patram means, so Vinod means hasya or joking. Patram means object. So Prithu Maharaj is saying that a person who is trying to repay the Brahmanas or his guru is actually Vinod Patram, or he is the laughing stock of the people, or he is worthy of ridicule. Prabhupada says that knowledge of Krishna is such a great gift that it is impossible to repay the benefactor. Therefore, Prithu Maharaj requested the Kumaras to be satisfied by their own benevolent activities in delivering the souls from the clutches of Maya. The king saw that there was no other way to satisfy them for their exalted activities. The word Vinodapatram can be divided into two words, Vina and Udapatram, or can be understood as one word, Vinodpatram, which means joker. A joker's activity simply arouses laughter, and a person who tries to repay the spiritual master or teacher of the transcendental message of Krishna becomes a laughing stock, just like a joker, because it is not possible to repay such a debt. The best friend and benefactor of all people is one who awakes humanity to its original Krishna consciousness. So 2 points are made. I'm just going to repeat them for emphasis. It is impossible to try and repay the debt of the Guru. But that does not mean that we do not try and repay it. So by following the instructions of the Guru, specifically in spreading Krishna consciousness on his behalf, one is able to satisfy the Guru. It's not repaying of debt, but it is simply for the satisfaction of one to whom we owe a debt that is beyond our ability to repay. Very, very nice and sweet purport. Okay, verse 48. Maitre uvacha tatmayoga pataya adirajena pujitaha Shilam tadyam samshanta khe bhavan mishatam nrinam. The great sage Maitri continued, being thus worshipped by Maharaj Prithu, the 4 Kumaras, who were masters of devotional service, became very pleased. Indeed, they appeared in the sky and praised the character of king, and everyone observed them. So the 4 Kumaras are described as Atma Yoga Patya. So generally Atma Yoga, so Atma generally refers to the soul. So Atma Yoga refers to the knowledge of the self, the soul, or the knowledge of the Paramatma. In the current context, we know that the 4 Kumars, they had both Gyan. So, or rather they had given both kinds of Atma Gyan. So they spoke about impersonal liberation in verses 37-38, and then they spoke about Shuddha Bhakti in the following verses. So when it says Atma Yoga Pataya, then their instructions were meant for those who see the self as the soul, or those who are actually fortunate to see themselves in relationship with Krishna. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada translates the phrase as masters of self-realization by devotional service. Right? So it covers both the nuances. Self-realization is Atma Yoga, that understanding that I am the spirit soul. And Atma Yoga also means connecting to the Paramatma, which is Bhakti. So that's why Prabhupada says that they're masters of self-realization by devotional service. So the Kumaras, however, praised the characteristics of Maharaj Prithu and his great devotional attitude and humility. The Kumaras were greatly satisfied by King Prithu's method of worship. It is by the grace of Maharaj Prithu that the common citizen in the domain could see the 4 Kumaras, flying in outer space. So we see that the four Kumaras came and they gave their association to Prithu Maharaj because of the desire of Lord Vishnu. The point to be noted here is that Prithu Maharaj, by his activities, by his consciousness, attracted the mercy and benediction of Lord Vishnu. Those who were there with Prithu Maharaj, the citizens, the members of the court, they did not have that qualification. But yet, Maitreya says that they could see the four Kumaras. So he says that, Ke Bhavan Vistaram Nanam. So even though they did not have the qualification, how were they able to see? See means that they also heard the instructions of the four Kumaras. How were they able to do it? So their only qualification was that somehow or the else they had the opportunity to associate with Prithu Maharaj. So by associating with one who has exalted qualities, one also gets access to what happens to the people because of those exalted qualities. So similarly, we have access to transcendental knowledge because of the mercy of Srila Prabhupada. I mean, we are able to read and appreciate the commentaries of other acharyas because Srila Prabhupada has created that foundation. Otherwise, we would be confused. But Prabhupada is the house that we live in. And the commentaries by the other acharyas are the places that we go and visit. But we always come back to the house that Prabhupada has given us. If we didn't have that house, then we would be just vagabonds. One acharya, another acharya, some acharyas are, even if they're bona fide acharyas, they might say things that are slightly different. But the mercy of Prabhupada has given us this protection. Just like the mercy of Prithu Maharaj gave his citizens access to the precious knowledge of the four Kumaras. So Prabhupada writes that the four Kumaras were greatly satisfied by King Prithu's method of worship. It was by the grace of Maharaj Prithu that the common citizens in his domain could see the Kumaras flying in outer space. Okay, let's go to verse 49. Venyastu dhuryo mahatam samsiddhadyatma shikshaya aptakamam evatmanam menatmanyavastitah. Among great personalities, Maharaj Prithu was the chief by virtue of his fixed position in relation to spiritual enlightenment. He remains satisfied as one who has achieved all success in spiritual understanding. So from this verse 49 till the end of the chapter, is essentially a glorification of the qualities of Maharaj Prithu, the rule of Maharaj Prithu. So here Prithu Maharaj is addressed as Dhuryo Mahatam, Dhuryo Mahatam, the chief of the great souls. Srila Prabhupada translates Aptakamam Iva as fully satisfied. He says that he remains satisfied in his position. Vishwanath Chakravarti, because Iva means as if. So he translates it literally that Prithu Maharaj was as if fully self-satisfied. So Srila Prabhupada considers the self-satisfaction of Maharaj Prithu to come from his engagement in bhakti. And Vishwanath Chakravarti considers that since the four Kumaras had not spoken about Shuddha Bhakti, they had spoken about Gyan and they had spoken about Mishra Bhakti, Prithu Maharaj was as if fully satisfied. So Vishnu makes this point that one can only be satisfied by hearing about Shuddha Bhakti. Slight nuance that is teasing out over here, that because the four Kumaras did not do pure Krishna Katha, they did not speak about Shuddha Bhakti, right? Initially they spoke about impersonal, and then they spoke about Jnana Mishra Bhakti, essentially Sadhana Bhakti they are spoken about. So Prithu Maharaj was missing the narration of the pastimes of Krishna. So he was as if fully satisfied or almost fully satisfied. So Prabhupada says that remaining fixed in devotional service gives one the utmost in self-satisfaction. And this self-satisfaction can be achieved only by pure devotees who have no desire other than to serve the personality of Godhead. Everyone is hankering after peace of mind and self-satisfaction, but these can only be achieved by becoming a pure devotee of the Lord. And Vishwanath Chakravarti, he comments saying that that since Prithu Maharaj was a pure devotee, he could be fully satisfied only by Shuddha Bhakti. He had previously asked about Atma, just as he had asked about other scriptures for the knowers of the Vedas. The inquiry was not complete. The word Iva indicates that now that part was complete. He was still situated in his nature, Atmani. By the teachings about Atma, his nature of pure bhakti did not disappear. Srila Prabhupada also comments on Dhurya Mahata, the chief of the great personalities, by quoting Bhagavad Gita 9:13, Mahatmanas tumam partha devam prakritim ashrata, that how these great personalities are they are not under the clutches of the illusionary energy, but they are under the internal energy of Krishna. Okay, verse 50. Karmani cha yatha kalam, yatha desham, yatha balam, yathochitam, yatha vittam, akarod brahma satkritam. Being self-satisfied, Maharaj Prithu executed his duties as perfectly as possible according to the time and his situation, strength and financial position. His only aim in all his activities was to satisfy the absolute truth. In this way, he duly acted. So this is a very interesting verse because it demonstrates the conduct of pure devotees in the context of the performance of their prescribed duties. So previous verse have established the position of Maharaj Prithu as being a pure devotee of the Lord. Now, Maitreya says that Prithu continues to perform his prescribed duty. And what does he think about it? He says that he glorifies Maharaj Prithu. He's saying that Maharaj Prithu is a responsible devotee. So, as a pure devotee, there is no need for varnashram. But other people need it. Right? So Hanuman was able to cross the ocean on his own strength. But for others, there was a bridge that was built because they did not have the strength of Hanuman. So the pure devotees, they can cross over this ocean of material nations simply by the strength of bhakti. But others don't have that strength. They need the bridge of the varnashram. So why did Maharaj Prithu continue to perform his duty? Vishwanath Chakravarti, he gives 4 reasons for it. And this is something we're familiar with also. It appears in Bhagavad Gita. The first he says is, in order to teach people in general by example. The famous verse in Bhagavad Gita, 3rd chapter, Yadadashrati. Second is to avoid lapses in the following of varnashram. So the first is that people, if he was to give up varnashram, other people not ready would also give it. That's first reason. Second is that for those who are following varnashram, they need a role model. So for that purpose, he performed perfectly externally to become a role model. Third reason is to avoid criticism of the process of bhakti. What would be the criticism? That one is that people who do not understand the exalted nature of devotee will criticize them as parasites or lazy people. Sometimes people would criticize ISKCON devotees as being avoiding the responsibilities or simply living by begging or being lazy. And because of that, they themselves were committing so many offenses. So their own devotional life was being destroyed. So in order to prevent this kind of criticism of the process of bhakti, Maharaj Prithu, he continued to perform his prescribed duties. And fourth was, in order to keep the nature of bhakti confidential. Because if he would simply perform bhakti, we see that in the case of Maharaj Rishabdev, that in the final stages of his life, he was so much involved in bhakti that he did not care about, to some extent he cared because he cut ties with people in general. But even then, there was that king who observed his conduct and could not understand the confidential nature of bhakti. So then he basically speculated and created a whole deviant religion. Then Maitreya also talks about the activities that he performed and his consciousness. So Maharaj Prithu only performed prescribed activities that do not contaminate, which means that only activities in the mode of goodness. He considered that only the Brahmanas are performing this duties. So he says, Brahma Sat Kritam. So going back to the previous point, that understanding that the Brahmanas are the real proprietor of everything, he performed the duties under their guidance and for their pleasures. Third, without any desire for enjoying the results, because of his understanding the nature of karma. Fourth, he only performed those duties that were absolutely needed. Same point made in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, verse 21, where the Karma Yogi is described. That the person acts with mind and intelligence perfectly controlled, giving up all sense of proprietorship over his position and acts only for the bare necessities of life. Then fifth, he only performed exemplary activities. And finally, everything he performed was for the pleasure of the Lord. Okay, so let me pause over here and see if you have any discussion.
Prove the analogy that you gave about the bridge, Varnashram and the bridge, and Hanuman. So, but we know. I mean, I like that analogy. Basically, he built the bridge, and but I'm just trying to understand, Varnashram is not the method or the path to reach transcendence, right? I mean, it helps. It's a support system, but it's not a bridge, right?
It's not it's not Shuddha Bhakti, but it can lead to Shuddha Bhakti.
Right.
Right. So the analogy was more so in terms of explaining the difference between the approach of Hanuman and the other persons, not so much in terms of where the bridge was leading to.
Okay, got it.
And Hanuman didn't need a bridge, other people needed bridge. Right, so pure devotees, they don't need varnashram, other people need varnashram. But you're right, varnashram is what it is. From the pastime of Prithu Maharaj, one point also does come through, is that if varnashram is performed in perfect consciousness, that's what these 6 points that are made to describe the consciousness of Maharaj Prithu while he was performing the varnashram dharma, it is considered to be at the same level as devotional service. Right? So essentially, this is a description of Devi Varnashram. All activities are done for the pleasure of the Lord, with the proper consciousness, minimally entangling, and so all those sub-points are made. So it becomes a supporting anga to bhakti.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Okay, so yeah. So before we proceed, I did want to share something with you. So bit of good news actually, that I got my Bhakti Vaibhava certification. So which means that now I'm in a position to award Bhakti Vaibhava degrees also.
Awesome. Thank you, Prabhu. Congratulations.
Thank you, Ashwita. Thank you.
Congratulations, Prabhu.
Thank you, Santu. So I know we had this discussion sometimes back, and at that time, I had put things a little bit on hold because I had started the process of getting my certification. It took me this time to get it. But whoever is now interested in getting a formal certification can reach out to me, and maybe I can have a separate session just to explain the process and next steps, etc. Okay.
Can we just stay back on this call, Prabhu, for half an hour, and then probably you can explain to those who are interested?
Yes, absolutely. We can do that too.
Okay, thank you.
We'll do that. Okay, so continuing. Verse 51. Phalam brahmani sanyasya nirvisanga samahitah karmadhyaksham cha manvana atmanam prakritehe param. Maharaj Prithu completely dedicated himself to be an eternal servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, transcendental to material nature. Consequently, all the fruits of his activities were dedicated to the Lord. And he always thought of himself as a servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the proprietor of everything. So this verse is essentially describing Karma Mishra Bhakti Yoga. So Srila Prabhupada, he first explains Karma Yoga in the purport. And this is, of course, a revision of what we have already done in the Bhagavad Gita. So Prabhupada says the first requirement for proper execution of Karma Yoga is given herein, Phalam Brahmani Sannyasa or Vinyasa. One must give the fruits of the activities to the Supreme Brahman, Parabrahman Krishna. By doing so, one actually situates himself in the renounced order of life, sannyas. This is more or less paraphrasing Krishna's response to Arjun's question at the beginning of the 5th chapter. But Prabhupada, if you notice, he builds in certain nuances, because this is Bhagavatam, he builds in certain nuances that is suitable for more advanced study of those who are studying this, more advanced study of the scriptures. So he says that the execution of Karma Yoga is Phalam Brahmani Sanyasa, that one is giving the fruits to the Supreme Brahman, Parabrahman, Krishna. Now, in one way, these these two terms are describing Krishna, Supreme Brahman and Parabrahman. Another way is that this goes down to the technical definition of Karma Yoga, that those who are performing Karma Yoga are not necessarily performing for the pleasure of Krishna, because they may not have a clear understanding of the position of Krishna, but they are essentially performing it for transcendence. And that transcendence could include the Brahman, could include Paramatma, or could include Krishna. So that's why he includes, Prabhupada includes all the three in the definition of Karma Yoga, right? So the main qualification in Karma Yoga is that you're offering the results. Now, what does offering the results mean? It means that you're not taking it, which means that you're indifferent to it. Does not mean that you reject the results, right? Does not mean that you cook the food. When the food is cooked, you throw the food away, saying that I'm not attached to the results. You still eat the food, but you're whether it is good or bad, whether it is salty or sweet, you're indifferent to it. So the foundation of Karma Yoga is akarma. The foundation of akarma is equanimity. Right from the 2nd chapter, Krishna starts glorifying this quality, right? Now, when one advances in understanding transcendence, so earlier on, transcendence is something, Brahman, Paramatma, Krishna, something, right? How does a person in that consciousness work? So let's assume the person works very hard to get a promotion. He does not get a promotion. And then he says, this is because of my own destiny. Or he gets the promotion, and then he says, not because of my hard work, because so many people are working hard. I got it because of my destiny. And destiny is basically the impersonal representation of Krishna. The Krishna is manifesting as the rules of the karma. But at some point, if he starts understanding that behind this destiny, behind this law of karma, there is a person, and ultimately everything is being bestowed by him or done for his pleasure, then that Karma Yoga becomes Karma Mishra Bhakti. There's a predominance of Bhakti, but essentially the Bhakti is performed on the platform of karma. The person still performs the activities, right? He still so yad karoshi, yad asnashi, yad juhoshi, tadashita, right? You know, Krishna says, whatever you do, focus is on you, Krishna says, right? So that means the person is still attached to doing his duty, but madarpana. But then he offers all the results to Krishna. So this is essentially Karma Mishra Bhakti, also Devi Varnashram, right? Karma Mishra Bhakti is performed on the platform of Devi Varnashram. Now, coming back to Prithu Maharaj, as a devotee, he understood the transcendence of Krishna. He had no confusion about Brahman, Paramatma, and Krishna. He knew Krishna, right? So he is glorified as one who performed his prescribed duties, like performing yagyas, giving in charity. Externally, he was performing them because they were his prescribed duties. Internally, he was completely detached from them, understanding that they are only for the pleasure of Krishna. And this is one of the central themes of Bhagavad Gita, right? Which is being encapsulated in this verse. So even though Prithu Maharaj lived like an attached householder, and we'll see later on how his position as a within quotes attached householder is glorified, he was actually a sannyasi. Prabhupada says that, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 18.2, giving up the fruits of one's activities to the Supreme Personality of Godhead is also called sannyas. And how was this renunciation achieved? Prabhupada said the word nirvisanga, uncontaminated, is very significant because Maharaj Prithu was not attached to the results. Right? So this is the tattva of converting karma to akarma by not being attached to the results. And the tattva of converting akarma to bhakti is by offering the results to Krishna. So this is how the transition happens so between karma yoga and bhakti yoga, the change is that of consciousness. So Prabhupada then gives this path from karma yoga to bhakti yoga, that when the fruits of an activities are rendered to the service of the Lord, one is actually performing karma yoga. Anyone can practice karma yoga, but it is especially easier for householders who can install the deity of the Lord in the home and worship him according to the methods of bhakti yoga. Right? So here Prabhupada begins with karma yoga and then ends with then how karma yoga becomes bhakti yoga. So in karma yoga, there are no reactions since the activities are performed with detachment. And when karma yoga becomes bhakti yoga, then ironically, the activities begin to attract reactions. So look at the scale, that when the person is performing vikarma or sakarma, then karma has reactions. When the person moves to the platform akarma, being detached or karma yoga, activities have no reaction. When the person moves from karma yoga to bhakti yoga, then the activities again begin to have reactions. The difference is that those reactions are now given by Krishna. So they are not really in the category of reactions, but in the category of reciprocation. That is why person performing karma yoga goes to the impersonal Brahman, because he's in the stage of no reactions. The person who is performing Bhakti Mishra or Shuddha Bhakti goes to Krishna or Vaikuntha, because now there is reciprocation by Krishna. So Prabhupada explains in the purport that in Krishna consciousness, the result of one's activities depend on the will of the Supreme Person. Right? So this is the nature of bhakti. In karma, it is dictated by the law of karma. But in bhakti, it is dependent on the will of the Supreme Lord. So that's why it is said that karma becomes akarma, and then akarma becomes Krishna karma. This point is also made in Brahma Samhita. Yastvandra Gopam Tavendra Mahosva Karma Bandhanu Rupa Phala Bhajana Mahatanoti Karmani Nirdhati Kintu Cha Bhakti Bhajam Govindamadi Purushottam Bhajami. Right? So Brahma is saying that Yastva Indragopam Athavendram. Right? Indragopam is like small insect, and from Indra to Indragopam, everybody is Swakarma. So everybody is Swakarma Bandhanuru Phala Bhajana Mahatmanoti. That they're bound by the results of their own karma. Exception Karmani Nirdhati Kintu Cha Bhakti Bhajam. Those who are performing devotional service, their Reciprocation is coming from only Krishna. This a slightly let's say a slightly deeper understanding on this, that one can understand from the instructions of Prabhupada in the purport of this verse, that he is saying that one should not become an idle devotee. So even if a person is making advancement in devotion, the person should continue to perform activities. Now, a devotee might say that bhakti is one of the 9 processes, Shravana Kirtan, so I can just spend the whole day Shravan, hearing, Kirtan, and that is definition of bhakti. Prabhupada is cautioning us against that. Karma should be there. Like there was this devotee by the name Babaji Madan Mohan, and he took care of Man Mandir. Very favorable to ISKCON when Bhakti Tirth Maharaj was in his last days. Then out of affection, he actually came and he sung for Bhakti Tirth Maharaj. Very exalted devotee. And he was 80 years old. Every day he would sweep the floor of the temple. He had no need to do that. And his body was also not cooperating, but some kind of activities should be there. Same reason, like when Arjun starts saying that should I do karma or karma, Krishna says they are the same, but karma gives you protection. It engages your senses, it purifies your heart, and it helps you set an example for others. Same 3 reasons are there in the relationship to bhakti also. That because while we are performing bhakti, then the karmendriyas need to be engaged, especially when it comes to sex desires. That's the most difficult to go. But if one is fully engaged in the karmendriyas, that cooking, cleaning, preaching, some kind of menial service needs to be done. So it engages the senses while they are still looking for engagement, purifies. Because as one does menial service, the qualities that are good for bhakti also are nourished. You clean the bathroom of the temple every day, you will automatically develop humility. If you go to the Gurudwaras in Delhi, then the Sikhs, they compete with one another to get the service of cleaning the shoes. So in Gurudwaras, if you go and leave your shoe, and when you come back, they would have cleaned it and polished it, and it's not that they'll just give it and put it and give it back to you. So there are people who will take it and they will nicely, and these are people who have given crores and crores of rupees in donation. Very, very rich people who are basically striving for that service. So that purification comes, humility, mercy of the devotees. And third, of course, the point that we made previously, that Prithu Maharaj was saying, to set an example. When they see advanced devotees who are constantly engaged in personal service, the other person says, okay, devotion doesn't mean you become a parasite. Devotion does not mean that you are now just sitting and eating Rajbhog. It means that you are the first one outside cleaning the temple or serving the devotees, etc. So a practical point is being brought forward by Srila Prabhupada over here. Okay, let's go on to verse 52. Gresho vartamanopi sasamrajya shrijanvitaha na sajatendriyartheshu nirammati. Maharaj Prithu, who was very opulent due to the prosperity of his entire kingdom, remained at home as a householder. He was never inclined to utilize his opulences for the gratification of his senses. He remained unattached, exactly like the sun, which is unaffected in all circumstances. So now Maharaj's Prithu position is being glorified, that he remained at home as a householder, even though he was fully aware of the position of the Lord and his. Can you hear me? Okay, I'm getting some displays, sorry. So he remained as apparently as an attached householder, but completely renounced. Now the second point is that oftentimes we see that those who are not very opulent, then those who are extremely opulent, right? Like Prabhupada would say that 50% of your wealth should be given to the temple. Later on, it became more like 10% of your wealth. For a person who's making not that much, they will give 10%. But for a person who's making millions, 10% is million. Unlikely they will give. So in absolute quantity, they may give more, but in relative quantity, they give less. Not the case of Prithu Maharaj. He was opulent beyond anybody's imagination. But that did not stop him from offering and Samrajya Shriya, complete with full opulences. But na asajata indriya theshu. But essentially it means that fully detached, which means that offering everything to the Lord. So this is actually virakti. So there's a difference between vairagya and virakti. So vairagya, so vairagya means that you're detached from the objects of the senses. You give up the objects of the senses. Virakti is that you actually are surrounded by the objects of the senses, but still remain detached. So virakti is a symptom of, in nectar devotion is defined as a symptom of bhava bhakti. Vairagya is simpler, that I may like sweets, but if there are no sweets in my house, I have no problem. Virakti is that I am sitting on a table filled with sweets, but still not eating them. Much more difficult. So this represents the situation of one who is advanced. Technically, bhava bhakti. Then Prithu Maharaj is also compared to the sun rays, that how the rays of the sun, they can fall on an area that is polluted, but they do not get polluted themselves, and they actually purify the area where they fall. So similarly, Maharaj Prithu, he was surrounded by so many objects of sense gratification. But not only was he not contaminated by that, he actually purified those objects by using them in the service of the Lord. So this is the height of absorption in Krishna. Now there is the height of absorption in Maya, where one is surrounded by all the objects of bhakti, but then also one is connecting to or looking at them as objects of sense gratification. there's the pastime in the life of Shripa Ramanujacharya, right? Once there was a procession of Lord Ranganath going, and everybody was enamored by the deity of Lord Ranganath, Pradarshan deity, of course. But there was one person who had no interest in the deity. He was simply staring at the face of the woman who was with her. And Ramanujacharya says that this is Ranganath going. You're looking at this woman. And the person, his name was Dhanavadas, and he says, you look at her eyes. If you show me one thing that is more beautiful than her eyes, then I will give up looking at her. So Ramacharya said, you come tomorrow. So morning he came the next day, and he took the darshan of Ranganath. And then Ramacharya prayed to Lord Ranganath that please reveal the beauty of your eyes to him. So when Dhanavadas looked at the deity, he completely forgot about any other beauty, and he became, and there's some other pastime linked to Dhanavadas also, how he became a perfect Grihastha disciple. In addition to him, the woman that he was with, according to some people, she was a prostitute, but he eventually married her, and she also became a very exalted devotee. So this is the situation where one changed from using everything spiritual in Maya's service to using everything material in Krishna's service. Okay, verse 53. Evam adhyatma yogena karmanya anusmarachan putran utpadayam asha pancharshayatma sammatam. Being situated in the liberated position of devotional service, Prithu Maharaj not only performed all fruitive activities, but also begot 5 sons by his wife Archi. Indeed, all his sons were begotten according to his own desire. So we see these verses, Maitreya is deliberately teasing these points out, right? So he says that he performed all fruitive activities. He begot 5 sons. These are activities that are typically performed by a attached Gramedi. But then he prefaces it by saying that situated in the liberated position of devotional service. And then he says all his sons were begotten according to his own desire. So what does this mean? That they were not begotten under the force of lust. So Prabhupada explains that the proper way to beget children is by the performance of appropriate samskars, which begins with the Garbhadan samskar, where the mother and father, they first purify their consciousness. In the current day and age, at least for Vaishnavas in ISKCON, it's by chanting 50 rounds, and that way the consciousness is purified. And in a way, the Grihastha ashram is like mango bearing season, right? So, like in India, you can only eat mangoes when there is the mango season. So, if you eat it before or after the season, you will either get bad mangoes or you will get chemically treated mangoes that are harmful to one's health. Similarly, associating with the opposite sex is only available in the Grihastha ashram. So Grihastha ashram is kind of compared to the mango eating season. Now, before and after that, in the brahmachari or the vanaprastha sannyas, it is harmful to the spiritual health. Now, even in the mango eating season, if one eats it without any consideration, one will still fall sick. One sits and eats 100 mangoes, he'll still fall sick. So similarly, in the Grihastha ashram, one only engages in sex activity is used as an example, but because I guess it's unique, but just sense gratification. So, but it is only performed as per the injunctions and the instructions. Injunctions mean when to do it, when not to do it. Instructions is cultivating internal detachment. So in all other ashrams, the persons demonstrate both. They demonstrate both internal and external detachment, right? In the Diti Kashyap Samvad, the third canto, Kashyap Muni notes that the Grahastha ashram is the safest because the husband is under the rulership of the wife. The wife is the commander-in-chief, and she is protecting the husbands. So the senses of the husbands. So only if in the Grahastha ashram the person is accepting the instructions of the scriptures, safe. Otherwise, the person is conquered and falls sick. So one of the important set of instructions in the Grahastha ashram is following the proper sanskars, which is what Prabhupada writes in the purport. That is the organic way of living. Right? So we can relate to these terms now. Organic way of living is that there is a mango on the tree, you pluck it, it's given to you and you eat it. Inorganic way of living is that there is a mango on the tree, it is plucked while it is still raw, it is then wrapped in chemicals, stored for a long period of time, and then when it is ready to be sold, then they treat it with nitrogen gas or something like that to induce it to become ripe. Then it's given to you, you eat it, and you will fall sick. So organic way of life is doing what is appropriate at that moment according to the ashram. That as a brahmachari, don't try to be a grahastha. As a grahastha, don't try to be a sannyasi or a vanaprastha, and so on. So Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati commenting, he talks about the Bhajananandis and the Goshtanandis. The Bhajananandis are those who are absorbed in bhajans. So they are ekantir, bhaktir, the solitude. Goshtanandis are the ones who preaches. And Bhakti Siddhanta says that this is an example of, so he's indirectly criticizing Bhajananandis, that this is an example of inorganic living. That while there is so much of suffering going on, then the duty of one who has seen the absolute truth is to help the others see it. While there is so much of Varna Shankar that is going on, it becomes important for a person who has the medicine to give it to the others. Otherwise, he is responsible for the degradation of the society. So Prithu Maharaj, he had the consciousness of a Bhajananandi. That he could have done Ekantir Bhaktir, but he became a Goshtanandi. He's remained in his position as the king, led everybody by example, instructed them, had children, performed his prescribed duties, while also guiding them towards the path of bhakti. So Prabhupada says that it is therefore understood by the words Atma Samatan that both Prithu Maharaj and Archie underwent the Garbhadan purificatory process before begetting children. And thus they begat all the children according to their desires and purified mental states. Prithu Maharaj did not beget his children out of lust, nor was he attracted to his wife for sense gratificatory purposes. He begot the children as Grahastha for the future administration of his government all over the world, essentially for the service of the Praja. Okay. So I'll do a couple of more verses. I do not believe I'll be able to, maybe I'll do 3 more verses. Verses are very short, but we're also running out of time. I'll do 3 more verses and stop for discussion. 54. Vijita swam dhumrkesham haryaksham dravinam vrkam sarvesham lokapalana dadarkaha pruthurguna. After begetting 5 sons named Vijitashva, Dhumrkesh, Haryaksh, Dravin, and Vrika, Prithu Maharaj continued to rule the planet. He accepted all the qualities of the deities who govern all other planets. So from this verse to the end of the chapter, it is explained how Prithu Maharaj possessed all the qualities of the predominant deities of all the planets. And Prabhupada explains that how the presiding deities of the various planets, they are either Chandravanshi or Suryavanshi. They're descendants of the sun god and moon god. And then he says that even the same arrangement was on the planet Earth, that the emperor of the planet Earth would be from one of the dynasties, and the rulers under him would be from the other dynasty. So when the emperor was Suryavanshi, the rulers would be Chandravanshi and vice versa. But so this was essentially to ensure that the qualities of both the predominating deities were there. So there was either a Suryavanshi presiding over a Chandravanshi or vice versa, but essentially it means that the qualities of both the deities were there. But Maharaj Prithu was so powerful that in himself he manifested all the qualities, not just of Surya and Chandravanshi, but all the presiding deities. Okay, next verse, 55. Gopitai jagat srashte kal sve sve achyutatmakaha manomag vritbhi somye gunah samranjanaham praja. Sri Prithu, since Maharaj Prithu was a perfect devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he wanted to protect the Lord's creation by pleasing the various citizens according to their various desires. Therefore, Prithu Maharaj used to please them in all respects by his words, mentality, works, and gentle behavior. So Prabhupada explains that a well-situated king is one who takes care of both the material and the spiritual needs of the citizens. And he stresses that the ruler should take care of the sense enjoyment needs of the citizens while guiding them to make spiritual advancement. Right? That's the mood of the Vedas. That the Vedas, the Karma Kand is there to take care of their material requirements. And the bhakti part of it is to guide them towards their ultimate goal. So similarly, the ruler should take care of the material requirements. Like when we see in first canto 11th chapter, I think, when the description of Krishna entering Dwarka. So amongst those who came to greet him were prostitutes. So why were they prostitutes in Dwarka? Because Ugrasen, as a perfect king, understood that they were men who had those kind of requirements. If those requirements were not met, they would create confusion in the society. They would contaminate the innocent women of the society. So to keep them at those needs at a bay, they were under the supervision. Prabhupada says that kept keeping them separate from the city, not putting them in the center of the city, but keeping them separate from the city. There was allowance for them to also indulge in these activities. So the point is that both the material and the spiritual. So like take ISKCON, for example. Prabhupada made this point over and over again. In the charter, it is said that ISKCON is a spiritual organization. But if you see, and especially in India, that ISKCON is more famous for distributing prasadam. Now it's becoming famous for schools. Why? Because this maturity is also appearing. That along with spiritual needs, material needs should also be taken. But this needs to be done carefully under the guidance of a superior Vaishnava. Prabhupada says that the word Achyut Atmaka is significant. For Maharaj Prithu used to rule the planet as the representative of the personality of Godhead. He knew that he was a representative of the Lord, and the Lord's creation must be protected intelligently. atheists cannot understand the purpose behind the creation. Although the material world is condemned, when it is compared to the spiritual world, there is still some purpose behind it. Right? And the Prabhupada said that the scientists and philosophers, they cannot understand this purpose. But the devotees understand the purpose of the creation, which is to give facilities to the individual living entities who want to lord it over the material nature. Now, that's not the only purpose. That while these facilities are given to them, they're also given facilities to purify their needs so that they can eventually go back to Godhead. Okay, the last verse, then we can stop for discussion. Verse 56. Rajityadhananamadheyam somarajiva Suryavadvishrajan grahanam pratapam cha bhavu vishaha. Maharaj Prithu became as celebrated a king as Somaraj, the king of moon. He was also powerful and exacting like the sun god, who distributes heat and light and at the same time exacts all planetary waters. So here, essentially, the different demigods are mentioned: sun, moon, fire, Indra, etc., and how the predominant qualities of these demigods were manifested in Maharaj Prithu. Okay, so let me pause over here and see if there is discussion.
Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, you mentioned about Virakti, right? So I'm wondering, like, does one need to have experience of certain things to develop Virakti, or because, like, sometimes you might not have experience, and that's why you might not desire.
Okay,
So
if we don't have any discussion, we can stop here. And as Achyuta had recommended that for those who want to stay on to have any to have further discussions on formal certification of Bhakti Vaibhava, can stay. Otherwise, others can leave.
Hare Krishna.
Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyaiva patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. अनंत कोटि वैष्णववृंद की जय, शिला प्रभुपाद की जय, थाई गौर प्रेमानंद। हरि हरि बोल। हरे कृष्ण।
Prajya, are you able to hear me? Is anyone else
Okay,
able?
so if you have any questions, just to set the context.